They say the river remembers. It remembers every name whispered into its skin, every soul that once sank beneath its surface, and every promise that was never kept. If you walk along the Hoi River when the lanterns begin to bloom, when the wind smells of wax and rain, you might hear it, a voice beneath the ripples, calling a name that is not yours, yet sounds almost like it could be. If that happens, do not answer, for the river does not call the living. Long before the tourists came, before the lanterns were painted in colors of joy, there was a rule among the old families of Hoi An. Do not touch what the night gives back, no matter how small, no matter how beautiful. For the night in this town is not empty, it barters. It began, or so the old man said, on a night when the moon hung swollen and sick above the Japanese bridge. The festival had ended. The air still carried the scent of paper and prayer. And there, on the stones slick with river mist, something had fallen. A jade bracelet, cracked in the middle like a mouth trying to speak. The tea seller who found it first refused to touch it. He claimed it whispered that when the wind passed through the hollow of the bridge, the sound changed, became a woman's breath. Others laughed, until Mai came. She was a traveler returning from far away, a woman who had once lived by this river as a child, who had played among these lanterns before she knew what ghosts were. She saw the bracelet glimmering beneath the orange light, and for a reason she could not name, she stopped. The sound around her dimmed. The drums, the flutes, the soft laughter, all fell away, as though the night itself held its breath. She knelt. Her hand hovered above the jade, and for an instant, the reflection in the stone was not hers. A pale wrist, a hand wet with river water, a pulse that did not beat. Still, she picked it up. When her fingers closed around it, the air thickened. The nearest lantern flared, then dimmed, its flame twisting into a shape. A face half-formed, eyes open but sightless. It flickered once, then vanished. From across the river, the old woman who sold paper lotuses dropped her basket. She murmured a chant that no one understood anymore. It was not a prayer. It was a warning. But Mai was already walking away, the bracelet cold against her skin, like the memory of a hand that had not yet let go. That night the rain came, slow, endless, like a ritual washing over the town. Mai stayed in a guest house near the ancient market, a house built from dark teak and time. The owner told her, smiling, "You'll hear the river breathe here. Don't be afraid, it's part of the night." But when the house fell quiet, she realized the breathing was not coming from outside. It came from within. A soft rhythm, deep beneath the floorboards, as if something below was sleeping and dreaming of her. The bracelet lay on the table. Water beads formed on its surface, though the room was dry. Each droplet rolled down like sweat, gathering at the crack in the jade, where it pulsed faintly, as though the stone itself had a heartbeat. Then came the whisper, low, wet, like silk sliding over bone. A language she could not understand, but her name was there. She could feel it, not spoken, but remembered. The lamp beside her flickered violently, its flame bent sideways, drawn toward the bracelet like breath toward a wound. And then, the lantern outside her window, one she swore she had not lit, blazed alive in pure green light. It burned without wick, without oil, without mercy. Shadows on the wall began to move, slow at first, then faster, circling her like dancers bound by invisible strings. One of them stopped behind her shoulder. Its outline quivered, and in the brief silence before she turned, she heard the faint, wet sound of someone smiling. When she looked, no one was there. Only the bracelet lying open, the crack now wide, like a mouth. The lantern's flame dimmed, and in the glass reflection, a second face appeared beside her own. Its lips moved with hers, but the voice that answered came from somewhere older. It said only one word, in a dialect she didn't know, yet somehow understood. Return. Mai didn't sleep that night. No one does, once the dead have learned their name. To this day, near the old temple wall by the river, a single lantern still burns green. No one lights it. No one dares to touch the jade that lies beneath it. A circle broken, a promise unkept. The locals say it calls out when the rain begins to fall, a voice from the river repeating what the first whisper said. Do not touch what the night gives back. Hoi An is a town built on whispers. If you walk its narrow veins at dawn, you can still smell the river on the bricks, hear the low chant of fishermen who no longer cast nets but prayers. They call it the town that breathes through water, for when the tides rise, the streets themselves exhale. I found an old article once, written in 1996 before the lantern festivals grew into what they are now. It was published in a local paper, Quang Nam Evening News. The piece was short, hidden in the corner of the page. It mentioned a strange death near the Japanese bridge. A woman, unidentified. Only a small jade bracelet was found beside her. No one claimed the body. No family came. The case faded like river mist. But the reporter who wrote it, a man named Hoi An, disappeared not long after. They say he kept visiting that same bridge, chasing the truth of the lantern ghost. His notebook was found inside a sealed jar near the riverbank. Most of the pages were water-stained, but one sentence survived. The light burns without fire. The woman breathes through the water. Local guides won't mention this, of course. Hoi An lives on beauty, not ghosts. But if you ask the older generation, the ones who still light incense before the first rainfall, they'll tell you something else. That there are spirits bound not to graves, but to objects of longing. Things left behind by those who died still wishing to return. And when someone finds such an object, touches it, claims it, a part of them must take the owner's place. They call it the invisible exchange. An old belief, older than Buddhism, older than the trade ships that once filled the port. Even now, some families still bury the personal belongings of their dead under flowing water to ensure no one will ever pick them up. The jade bracelet, some say, was one of these objects, a burial piece from centuries ago, unearthed during a flood. But things that come from the river always seek return. They wait, and so did Mai's bracelet. The owner of the guest house where Mai stayed told her later that strange things began happening the night she arrived. Dogs refused to bark near her door. Candles in the hallway melted without heat. Even the fish in the kitchen jars floated motionless, as if listening. He said her room smelled of wet stone, like a riverbed exposed after the rain. And sometimes, just before dawn, a low humming sound rose from within the walls. A rhythm too even to be wind, too steady to be rats. It was almost human. The next morning, Mai went to the market by the river. Locals remember her, the woman in the gray scarf, moving slowly between stalls, her eyes distant, as though she was searching for something she couldn't name. A fruit seller recalls she asked, "Where do the old lanterns go when they die?" No one understood the question. But when the seller looked down, she noticed the bracelet on Mai's wrist, wet, as if she had just pulled it from the river, and the woman's wrist, pale, faintly bruised, marked by something that looked like fingerprints. That afternoon, the rain returned. Not a downpour, but a drizzle that whispered against every tile roof, seeping into the seams of the old town like veins reopening. The lanterns should have gone out, but they didn't. Instead, a faint green glow spread along the streets, weaving from one lamp to another. until the entire riverside shimmered with the same sickly hue. Visitors said it was beautiful, mystical, almost supernatural. But the locals locked their doors early. They said it was the returning light, the sign that the dead were walking through their own reflections. That night, a fisherman on the opposite bank claimed he saw a woman standing on the bridge, her hair dripping, her face turned toward the water. She held something in her hand, a small circle of jade that pulsed with its own breath. And though the river was rising, her reflection remained still, unmoving, as if it belonged to another. When he shouted to her, the reflection smiled. The next morning, the guest house owner knocked on Mai's door. No answer. Inside, the room was quiet. Too quiet. The lamp was unlit, yet the walls glowed faintly, as though the paint itself had remembered light. On the table lay the bracelet, cracked wider now, its surface slick with condensation, and beside it, a line drawn into the wood with a single fingernail. "Do not touch what the night gives back." The owner swore he hadn't written it, nor could he explain the watermarks leading from the table to the window, a trail of damp footprints ending where the lantern outside still burned. Green. That house is still there. They rent the other rooms, but not the one she stayed in. People say the wood never dries inside it. No matter the season, no matter the prayers. At night, if you walk past, you might see a shadow move behind the window. A woman's outline, her arm resting near the table, her fingers tracing something invisible in the air. Sometimes she looks up, and the lantern flares, casting your own reflection onto the river below. For just a moment, you might see two faces instead of one. Even now, in the registry of missing persons from Quang Nam province, there is one entry, unnamed, marked only with a note, female, believed to have drowned, bracelet missing. And under it, in faint handwriting, almost erased by time, when found, do not return the jade to the water. It will find its way home. The river changed after that night, or perhaps it was Mai who changed, and the river merely mirrored her. People said they saw her wandering before dawn, barefoot along the wet stones, her scarf trailing through puddles that reflected lanterns not yet lit. She never spoke to anyone, only paused as though listening to something the rest could not hear. By day, she seemed normal enough, polite, distant, the kind of traveler who carries nostalgia like a scent. But those who looked closely swore her eyes had grown darker, as if a shadow lived just behind the iris, watching through her. At the market, she touched things absent-mindedly, fruit, silk, trinkets, and every object she brushed seemed to cool, losing color for a heartbeat before warming again. The woman who sold incense sticks told me years later, "I didn't see a person. I saw a reflection that forgot to vanish. And then there was the smell, wet stone, mildew, not of decay, but of something that had been underwater too long. Her clothes never dried, her hands were always damp. When she paid for things, the bills left faint green stains on the vendor's palms." The guest house owner said that every night around 2, he'd hear footsteps above his room, slow, deliberate, pacing from one corner to another. But the next morning, her bed was untouched. No wrinkles, no warmth. He thought she was sneaking out, perhaps to the bridge again. Until one night, he climbed the stairs and listened. The footsteps stopped. He knocked. No answer. When he leaned against the door, he felt a pulse, a faint vibration running through the wood, like a heartbeat on the other side. Then softly 3 knocks came back. He fled before dawn. Later, he told the monks from the nearby pagoda. They came with incense, chanting softly, and sprinkled salt before her room. But when the door finally opened, the air inside was cold enough to miss their breath. The bracelet lay on the table again, though she had been wearing it the evening before. The crack had closed. Perfect circle once more. The abbot frowned. "This is not jade," he said quietly. "This is bone dust, pressed and bound in ritual clay." He refused to touch it. The monks left before sunset, leaving the room scented with ash and fear. That night, rain again. Always rain. Mai wrote something in her notebook before she slept. "The river hums like a throat learning my name." Then below it, a single line in another hand. Same ink, same pen, but written while she was asleep. "Names are doors. You have opened yours." The next morning she woke to find her pillow damp, not with sweat, but with river water, clear, cold, and upon it lay 3 lotus petals, pressed flat, black as night. When she looked at her reflection in the mirror, the bracelet glimmered faintly, and in its curve, a second face moved. A woman, hair tangled with riverweed, eyes open but unblinking, mouth curved in the faintest smile, as though whispering through glass. Mai blinked, and the image vanished. But the smell of wet earth lingered, and from the window came the faint sound of dripping. Steady, rhythmic, though the sky outside was dry. It was the same rhythm she'd heard beneath the floorboards, the same tempo as her heartbeat, as if something below the house was breathing with her, or through her. That evening she returned to the bridge. The Lantern Festival had ended days ago, yet the air still shimmered faintly green. Tourists were gone. Only the river moved, slow and heavy, like a living thing burdened by memory. She stood where she found the bracelet, placed her hand against the stone post. It felt warm, alive. A faint pulse ran beneath her palm. Steady, slow, not unlike her own. A voice came then, soft, female, echoing from the water below. "You brought me home." Mai stepped back, but her reflection did not. It stayed, smiling up at her, one wrist bare, the other wearing the jade. The water rippled once. The reflection lifted its hand, and the light from the lantern above flared so brightly that she saw for an instant what lay beneath the surface. 1,000 faces, drifting, eyes open, mouths moving in silence, each with a faint ring of green circling their wrists. She screamed, but no sound came, only bubbles rising through air that had turned to water. Then as suddenly as it began, the vision broke. She stood alone again, soaked, shivering, the jade bracelet heavy and cold. Behind her, the old woman with the paper lotuses was watching. Her lips moved slowly, repeating the same chant as before. Only this time Mai could understand it, every word. "The river gives what it takes. The living must not keep what breathes beneath." Mai dropped the bracelet. It hit the stone with a sound that was not stone. A wet thud, like flesh. But before it could roll into the river, a thin, pale hand rose from the water and caught it. Then the ripples closed, and the night fell silent. At dawn, the fisherman said the river was higher than he'd ever seen it. The lanterns drifted backward against the current, as though drawn towards something deep beneath the bridge. And when the first light touched the water, there were 2 shadows standing side by side, but only one figure on the bridge. The rain had stopped that morning, but the town still smelled of wet stone and incense smoke. The river below moved sluggishly, as if something heavy clung to its heart. Mai sat by the window of her small rented room. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the bracelet. She had wrapped it in cloth, hidden it deep inside her bag the night before. Yet when she opened her eyes this morning, it was already there, on her wrist. She didn't remember putting it on. The jade no longer shone green. It pulsed faintly, each beat synchronized with the pulse in her veins. When she pressed her fingers against it, she swore she could feel warmth. Not hers, but something slower, older, breathing through stone. A whisper followed, soft, female, almost gentle. "Do not be afraid. I was alone too." Mai froze. Her reflection in the window blinked half a second too late. She rose quickly, grabbing the bracelet, trying to tear it off, but it refused. The clasp was gone. Seamless circle fused to her skin. Her breath quickened. She ran to the washroom, scrubbing it under cold water until her hands numbed. But the more she scrubbed, the darker the water became. A faint green fog rose from the basin, curling like fingers around her wrists, creeping upward toward her throat. And then, a voice again. This time not a whisper. A memory spoken through her own lips. "You wore me once. You promised to return." Mai stumbled back. Her vision blurred. She saw flashes, lanterns drifting upside down, a woman kneeling in the river, blood staining her robe, and a circle of jade pieces arranged like petals around a corpse. Her heart pounded so loud she thought the room might crack. When she looked again, the basin was empty, but on the mirror, fog had written a single word: remember. That night she couldn't sleep. The air was heavy, pressing against her lungs. She lit a candle by the window, hoping the flame would steady her thoughts. But as the candle burned lower, the flame bent toward her wrist, drawn by something unseen. When she closed her eyes, the darkness was no longer dark. She saw through water, not through air, a world beneath the surface, ruins of temples drowned in silt, carvings of gods long forgotten, and shadows moving like dancers without form. In the center stood a woman, hair floating around her face, eyes glowing faintly green. She reached out. Her lips moved slowly, and Mai heard every syllable inside her skull. "We were bound by water. Do you not recall the vow?" Mai shook her head. Her voice came out cracked. "Who are you?" The figure smiled, and the water shimmered around her like silk. The first, the last, the one who waited. Then the vision fractured. A rush of water flooded her mind, and she woke screaming. The room was soaked, walls dripping as if it had rained inside. Her notebook lay open on the desk, ink smeared, pages warped. On the latest page, written in her handwriting but not her words, "When the river takes a name, it never gives it back. Only the body returns." The bracelet tightened. She gasped, feeling it pulse faster, harder. Each throb a heartbeat too strong, as if something beneath her skin was trying to get out. She grabbed a pair of scissors and pressed them against the jade. The metal bent. Sparks flashed. The stone hummed, a deep, resonant tone that filled the room like a prayer in reverse. And then, silence. The candle flickered once and died. In the dark, she heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling her room. Wet footprints appeared on the floorboards, each step closer, each one followed by a faint dripping sound. When the last footstep stopped, she felt cold breath against her ear. A voice, tender but hollow, whispered, "Don't you see? You brought me back." Her reflection in the window smiled again, but her own face did not. Outside, the river began to rise. The villagers said it sounded like chanting carried through water, 1,000 voices murmuring the same word again and again: return. By morning, Mai was gone. Her room lay in perfect order, except for one thing: a trail of wet footprints leading from her bed to the edge of the bridge. On the stone post where she once stood, the bracelet rested again, gleaming green, flawless, as if it had never been worn. And beneath the bridge, the river moved slower than before, dragging its own reflection behind it, like a mirror that refused to let go. There is an old story whispered by the elders of Hoi An, one they tell only when the night river runs too still, and the lantern flames turn inward, as though the light itself is listening. They say that once, long ago, when the silk merchants still ruled the harbor and the town smelled of camphor and crushed lotus, there lived a young woman named Lian. She was known for her delicate hands, the way she embroidered prayer charms onto wedding garments, each thread carrying a secret blessing. Men from far provinces came just to see her at her window, where she worked by the dim light of oil lamps. Her beauty was soft, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet sorrow, as if she had already seen her own ending. She was to be married to the son of a river trader, a union arranged by family, but one whispered to be blessed. The night before her wedding, her mother gave her a gift, a jade bracelet passed down through generations. It was said to have been carved from the scales of a serpent spirit who once guarded the river's deepest gate, a charm for protection, a seal of love that would never fade. But love is not a thing that stays pure for long in a town that breathes the same air as ghosts. On the day of the wedding, the groom never arrived. His boat, laden with silks, offerings, and musicians, was found drifting near the river mouth, untouched. Every passenger gone, no struggle, no sound, just water inside their shoes and the faint smell of burned incense beneath the planks. Lian waited by the dock until the moon rose. She still wore her red veil, still clutched the jade around her wrist. When dawn came, she walked into the river. Witnesses claim they saw her reflection bow 3 times before she vanished beneath the lanterns. Some said the water closed over her too gently, like hands welcoming her home. For 3 nights after, the river turned green. Every fish surfaced belly up, their scales glinting like jade. And in the temple by the northern bank, a monk awoke to find a single phrase scratched into the wooden altar: "A vow unfulfilled binds forever." They buried an empty coffin for her. But each year, on the night her wedding should have been, the lanterns on the river refused to stay lit. Even now, the old ferrymen will not cross after midnight. They say a woman in bridal silk waits by the central bridge, her face covered, her hands dripping. Sometimes she asks for a ride to the opposite shore. Sometimes she offers a gift, a jade bracelet, smooth and cold as river bone. And those who take it never see the sunrise the same way again. When Mai's aunt, the one who owned the small guest house, found the bracelet on the bridge, she hesitated. It was beautiful under the mist, glowing faintly, like it wanted to be found. But she remembered the story her grandmother told. Never touch what the river returns. If it comes back, it's not for you. So she called the local temple instead. 2 monks arrived before dusk. They said little, only placed the bracelet inside a clay jar sealed with ashes and salt. They prayed quietly, their chants blending with the murmur of the river. But halfway through, the lanterns outside the window began to sway, though no wind blew. The younger monk faltered, his voice trembling. Then the jar cracked, a thin sound like a fingernail on glass. Inside, something pulsed once, like a trapped heartbeat. The elder monk turned pale. He whispered, "This one remembers." They took the jar and left before nightfall. No one saw where they buried it. But the next morning, a green shimmer ran through the water near the old bridge. The locals said it looked like silk unraveling, sinking deep into the current. Weeks later, a fisherman claimed to see Mai. He said she was standing at the far end of the dock, barefoot, wearing a white ao dye soaked through. She smiled at him, but when he blinked, her face had changed. Half of it was his daughter's. Half belonged to someone older, someone not of this time. That night, he threw his nets into the fire and never fished again. Some say the bracelet is still somewhere beneath the silt, waiting for the next hand foolish enough to reach for it. Others believe it drifts, carried by the tide, seeking the one who will finally return the vow. But listen closely. If you walk by the river after the lanterns go dark, you might hear the sound of silk dragging through water and a voice calling softly from below. Do you still remember me? And if by chance you see a glint of green among the reeds, turn away. For every story born of the river must one day be claimed by it. The vow was never broken. It was merely waiting for someone to wear it again. They say the monks from Chuakao never speak of that night, but the town remembers, through whispers, through the way the water still smells of incense and ash when the moon reaches its fullest curve. It began with silence, the kind that feels alive, the kind that listens back. The elder monk, the one who had sealed the bracelet in clay, woke from a dream drenched in sweat. In his dream, a woman stood beside the river, holding out her wrist, the jade cracked and bleeding light. She said, "The vow must be fulfilled, or the river will forget its course." By dawn, he gathered his disciples. They carried the cracked jar in a red cloth, ascending the temple stairs barefoot. Lanterns lined the path, their flames bending inward as the monks passed. Even the cicadas were quiet, as though the whole town had agreed to hold its breath. They reached the pagoda at the edge of the river, where the current was deepest. There the ritual began. The elder monk placed the jar in a circle of salt and lotus ash. Each disciple held a lantern carved with the sigil of an eye, a mark meant to see what human eyes could not. They began to chant. Low at first, like the hum of the earth awakening, then louder, rising in rhythm with the heartbeat of the water. The air thickened. The scent of wet stone and old rain returned. A green mist seeped from the cracks in the jar, curling upward, shaping itself into the outline of a woman kneeling. Her veil was soaked through, her face obscured, but her voice was clear, a whisper threaded with centuries of longing. "I was promised a return. Why do you seal me away?" The youngest monk faltered, his lantern flickering. The elder struck his staff upon the stone, reciting the binding sutra. "What belongs to the river must rest in silence." But the spirit only laughed. The sound was like water boiling beneath ice. "You speak of silence, yet you pray so loud." The lanterns dimmed one by one. The salt circle broke, and from the cracks in the ground, thin streams of water bled upward, forming small hands, grasping, reaching. The monks backed away. One stumbled, his robe dragging through the circle. Where the salt had been, a pool formed, dark, mirror still. The woman turned her head toward him. Her veil shifted, and he saw a face both young and ancient. Eyes that remembered every reflection ever cast upon the river. He screamed once, then fell silent. The pool swallowed him whole. The elder monk pressed his palms together. "She is bound to memory," he said. "We cannot banish what the living keep remembering." He reached into his robe and drew out a lantern, one different from the others, made of black silk, its flame pale as bone. "This is the last lantern," he whispered, "the one that never returns to shore." He placed it upon the river. The flame wavered once, then steadied. The spirit's laughter softened. She looked down at the lantern, and for a moment, her reflection and the flame merged. "Is that my name?" she asked. "It was," said the monk, "until we forgot it." Then the lantern sank, slowly, gracefully, like a bride bowing beneath the water. The river went still. The mist dissolved. When the monks looked again, the jar was gone. Only the faint scent of lotus remained. But the peace did not last. That night, the villagers woke to find every lantern floating on the river had turned green. Their flames did not flicker. They burned steady, cold, casting no light at all, and in the morning a single message was found written on the temple wall, the ink still wet though no brush had touched it. The vow cannot be undone, only continued. From then on, the Festival of Lanterns in Hoi An changed. Each year, the river demanded one lantern to be sent out, without a name written upon it. No wishes, no prayers, just an empty flame. They say it belongs to her, the drowned bride, still searching for the promise she was denied. And if the lantern drifts toward you, you must not touch it, for it is not seeking light. It is seeking warmth, the warmth of a hand that once wore jade. Now some nights when the air is too still and the lanterns glow green, people say they see her again, not walking, but gliding just above the water, her hands extended as though offering a gift. Those who look too long swear they hear their own name called from beneath the surface, and those who answer never answer again. It was more than a decade later when the river began to call again. The town had changed. Paved streets, electric lights, tourists with cameras and guidebooks who spoke of Hoi An as if it were just another picture to collect. But the river remembered. It always remembers. On the night of the Lantern Festival, a young woman named Lynn arrived from Saigon. She was a photographer, quiet, precise, the kind of person who watched more than she spoke. Her project was simple: capture the soul of the old town through sound and shadow. She carried a small recorder, a vintage model she had found in an antique market, and an old film camera that clicked softly, as if it too feared breaking the silence. Her guide warned her not to stay past midnight. He said it lightly, but his eyes did not match his tone. When the river stops reflecting the lanterns, he said, you should not look down. Lynn smiled, thinking it was just a superstition, the kind that locals tell to keep outsiders intrigued. But she had come for those whispers of the past, for the stories that flickered between truth and dream. That night, she set up her tripod beneath the old Japanese bridge. The air was damp. The scent of river moss mingled with smoke from 100 candles. Lanterns drifted like constellations, their colors bleeding softly into the current. She pressed record. At first, the sound was ordinary: rippling water, muted laughter from the banks, the slow, mournful song of a boatman guiding his raft. But as the crowd thinned and the voices faded into the distance, another sound began to emerge. A low hum, rhythmic, like someone breathing through the river itself. The recorder hissed, then crackled, and then a whisper, soft, uncertain, but undeniably her name. Lynn! She froze. The voice had not come from behind her, nor from the bridge. It came from below. The microphone picked up the faintest echo, a second voice repeating each time closer, wetter, as though the word was being spoken through water. Lynn! She leaned over the edge of the bridge, her breath clouding the lens. The lanterns had stopped drifting. Each one hovered in place, their flames dimming to a strange, cold green. And beneath them, a face, half seen, half born of reflection. A woman in white. Her hair floated outward, her eyes wide and hollow, as though she had been waiting for centuries to be noticed again. The recorder clicked, the film camera flashed, and the face smiled. Lynn stumbled backward, her heel catching the edge of a wooden beam. The bridge creaked, and for an instant, she thought it would give way. She turned to run, but stopped, because there at her feet lay something small and gleaming, a bracelet, jade green, wet, cold. It pulsed once when she touched it, and a whisper coiled around her like mist. You remember now. Her fingers trembled. The wind had stopped. Even the candles on the river no longer flickered. their flames frozen, as though trapped between breaths. She pressed the recorder to her chest. The tape inside spun faster, though she hadn't rewound it. Voices overlapped, some chanting, some weeping, all murmuring the same word again and again. Return, return, return. The camera around her neck grew heavy, its strap biting into her skin. When she lifted it, the viewfinder no longer showed the lanterns. It showed water, black, deep, infinite, and a hand reaching upward from below, beckoning her closer. Her pulse quickened. Something in her chest answered, a rhythm not her own. She took one hesitant step toward the edge, and then she heard it, a wedding song, faint, broken by the distance of time. Trum nam tin vien man, nguyen kiep sao chang lian hao. Her grandmother had sung that once, a lullaby about eternal vows, the song every bride once learned in this town. Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered almost without knowing, Lian? The water rippled. The face beneath the surface smiled wider. You wore me once. The bracelet tightened around Lynn's wrist. Pain shot through her veins like cold fire. She screamed, but no sound came out. The recorder burst with static, then went silent. Only the river spoke now. Only the river. At dawn, the villagers found her camera. The strap was tangled around the bridge post. The lens cracked, but still warm to the touch. The last frame captured was blurred. A figure in white, half submerged, holding a lantern that burned green against the dark. Her body was never found. But sometimes when the festival returns and the lanterns drift along the same current, the locals say one lantern always moves against the tide, floating upstream, its flame whispering softly through the mist. Lynn, Lynn. If you ever visit Hoi An when the air grows thick before rain, when the lanterns refuse to burn bright and the river smells faintly of camphor and wilted lotus, walk carefully. Do not lean too close to the water. Do not follow the light that calls your name, because the river remembers. It remembers every face that has ever looked into it, every vow whispered to its reflection. It remembers Lien, the bride who drowned with her promise unfulfilled. It remembers Mai, who wore the jade once more and returned it with her life. It remembers Lin, who thought she came as a visitor but found herself instead as the next name in the song. And if you listen closely, beneath the sound of rain on wooden beams, beneath the slow heartbeat of the current, you can still hear their voices, not pleading, not cursing, just repeating the same vow that began centuries ago. I will return until the vow is kept. The locals pretend not to see the signs anymore. They light their lanterns, they sell their postcards, they take photos by the bridge. But when the wind shifts, they avert their eyes from the water, because sometimes beneath the surface, the lanterns do not reflect at all. They hang suspended in another world, one just a breath away, where the drowned bride still waits. She waits not for love, but for memory, because what is forgotten must always seek a vessel, a hand, a name, a heartbeat. And the jade, that old circle of stone, is still out there. It rolls gently with the tide, resting near the reeds one night, caught in a fisherman's net the next. Sometimes it appears on the steps of a hotel, gleaming faintly green beneath the morning mist. Sometimes it's found on a market stall, its surface smooth, innocent, as if it were only a piece of history. But those who buy it always say the same thing, that it feels warm, like skin, that it hums faintly when the lanterns are lit, that sometimes in the dark they hear a woman humming an old wedding song, the tune carrying through the stillness like a thread pulled from another world. A year after Lynn disappeared, A man editing her recordings for a documentary heard something strange, a sound hidden beneath the static. He slowed it down, layer by layer, until the distortion cleared. It was a voice, her voice, but it wasn't speaking to him. If you hear me, don't touch the river. It remembers what it gave. Then another voice joined hers, soft, distant, almost kind. We remember together. The tape ended there. He deleted the file that night, but his computer never stopped humming, even unplugged, even turned off. The next morning, a faint ring of water marked the spot where the recorder had sat. There are people who swear they've seen her since, a figure in white, drifting between the reflections of lanterns, her hands cupped as if carrying something fragile, a flame, or perhaps a name. She never looks angry, just waiting. They say if she ever looks directly at you, you'll forget your own face for a moment, just long enough for her to borrow it, because the river needs new voices to tell its story again. And so the tale continues. If you are still listening now, remember this. When you walk the old streets of Hoi An and pass by the water's edge, do not pick up what shines beneath the lanterns. Do not touch what the river returns. If you do, you will feel the pulse of jade beneath your fingers, slow, alive, remembering you. And that night, when the lamps in your room flicker without wind, when the candle burns green, and the voice in the mirror whispers your name, you will know the vow has found you, and the river, patient and endless, will wait once more. To this day, the locals still send one lantern without a wish, without a name, drifting down the river alone. They say it belongs to her, the one who remembers. And if it ever stops beneath your window, don't look.